Hi folks, Christy from Shark Pixel here, and in today's class I am thrilled to bring you this work hand in hand, side by side tutorial on how we are going to add cool effects to our images. So anyone can take a photo out of camera and it can be beautiful and it can be lovely and the client can be super happy with what you've created, but there is a whole nother level of development and embellishment that we can do in Photoshop to truly make those images shine. And that's what we're going to be doing in today's course by adding effects and elements in the foreground. I call them peek-throughs, to really make your images come to life so that your clients are over the moon happy, thrilled with the end result, and want to only shoot with you from this point forward. All right? We are going to be using a couple demo files, and they are free for you to download, so you can follow along with me on how we take a regular image and we turn it into something spectacular. So definitely download those images. They are our base image, also some of the overlays that we're going to be adding into our shot. Everything that you need to follow along with this tutorial is going to be included in those downloads, so definitely check them out. And of course, they're all free. These are sneak peeks from a mega pack of over 900 items that I'm going to be releasing soon, but for this example, is all free for today. So I want you to download them and follow along. Here we have an image which was taken by Peter Sidorov. It's quite a beautiful image as is, beautiful model, lovely rose garden in the background. But we want to take this image and really create something spectacular out of it. And that's what we're going to be doing in this tutorial. So you have downloaded the base image that we're going to be working on. We are also going to be incorporating a couple overlays into this. So we've got our Shark Pixel Spring Peek Through 48 wide, our Shark Pixel Spring Peek Through 44 wide. Now both of these are included in the downloads, and also we've got our sun flare, which we're going to be adding as well. So we'll go back to our primary image and we're going to just start very simply by activating our Move tool, which is right up here at the top of our Tools panel. Then we're going to hold down Shift. We're going to click in the middle of our image and drag it and hover over our image that we want to drop it on. Then we come back down to the image and drop it. Now, you can see that the overlay is significantly bigger than the underlying image. So what we can do now is just bring it down in size a little bit. Now what these are going to do, they're really going to act to immediately add depth and texture to our frame. As you can see, all we have done here is layered a transparent PNG over our base image. And immediately, even though we've only done step one, this image is starting to look just that much richer and that much more dynamic. Okay, so we have gone ahead and we have layered in our first foreground peek through roses. All right, so they are definitely adding to the scene. They're helping to frame the model, everything like that. The next thing that I want to do is do the exact same thing on our Shark Pixel Peek Through 44 wide. Now you can see that these are already blurred for you and they are put on a transparent background, so they're very easy to add to any image that you have. All right, so we've got our base image here. We added our first set of roses. Let's do a different method. Let's hit Command A to select all and then Command C to copy all. And for my PC users, that's going to be Control A to select all and Control C to copy. Now we'll come back to our image, and if you want to just paste, it's Command or Control plus V. If you want to paste in place, which puts it right into the middle of your frame, hold down Shift while you do that, and that's going to allow you to shift to paste into place. Shift, Command V, Shift Control V for PC users. And there is our second bit of roses. Now you can see they are significantly too large, and that's fine. We're just going to bring them down here, make them a little smaller. And let's go ahead and transform these flowers. So we'll hit Command or Control T. And then I just want to go ahead and flip my frame. I'd like to flip this horizontally. So I'm going to right click on the area, and down here you'll see Flip Horizontal. And that's what we want to choose from our flyout menu. Now we can go ahead and click and drag over here, and we do not have that sharp edge on the side. The last step that I want to do for the roses is to just rearrange them. I like these roses here on the right, but I feel like they would probably lend themselves better if they were behind our other roses that we added in. So what I'll do is I'm just going to come over to my layers palette. I'm going to click and drag and relocate my layer 2 underneath my layer 1. That's going to allow the foreground roses just to be in the forefront, and then these other roses can be kind of an afterthought behind them. So I'm going to just drag them over to the side as well. Make them a little smaller. Maybe put them right there. That looks good. The first thing that jumps out at me when I look at these is that they are significantly brighter than the rest of the frame. So in order to darken them, I'd like to clump them together or group them together. So we are going to come over to our layers palette. We're going to select our first layer, and we'll hold down Shift to select our second layer of roses and hit Command or Control G to group them together, and we'll call these roses. Let's call them foreground roses. All right, so that's good. And if we open up the disclosure arrow here, you can see what is encompassed in this group. Now, they are too bright. So instead of darkening both of them layer by layer, what I can do, because they are both in the same group, is I can darken them, and then I can only apply that darkening effect to the layers that are inside the group of roses, the folder called foreground roses. So I'll start by activating my hue saturation adjustment layer. Now here we do have a bit of a problem. Our hue saturation layer has ended up inside the foreground roses folder. Now this is something that I don't want to have happen. So instead, I'm going to click and drag until I see the blue bar above, right here, above the foreground roses folder. And now what I can do is hold down Option or Alt as I hover my mouse in between these two layers, and that will clip this hue saturation adjustment layer to any pixels that are housed within the foreground roses group. Okay, so we'll click on our adjustment layer icon. We'll start by changing the blend mode of the adjustment layer that we have, and my go-to is always going to be multiply to darken anything. But with multiply comes added saturation, which is something that I sometimes don't like. So because of that, in the properties window, for our hue saturation adjustment layer, I can easily come and just drag down the saturation of those foreground roses so that they just blend a little bit better with the underlying image. Lastly, just backing off of the opacity of that darkening for the flowers in the foreground, and that looks good. So I ended up with an opacity of 67%, a blend mode of multiply, and then I did also bring down the saturation to -37. So that's what's going on there. And now, as you can see, this darkening effect is only being applied to whatever is in the layer underneath of it, which it's clipped to. And that layer in this case is our foreground roses layer group. So that's our first step. We've gone and we've added in our foreground elements, and off the bat, this is the first step, right? Off the bat, it has added depth, and I think that it's added some really great stuff to our image. Next, we're going to move on, and we're going to take our sun flare, which is also included in the downloads, and we're going to take this image and we're going to, again, make sure our move tool is activated. We're going to click and drag in the middle of this file, and then we're going to hover over our Peter Sidorov image, and then we're going to drop in our sun flare. Now, if I hit Command or Control T to transform this, I can bring it down to the size of the file that I'm working on. You do always want to make sure that your files or your overlays that you're adding into your image are of a good size. If they're not, they're going to be too small for your files and they'll end up getting pixelated. So the larger the overlay, the better. Our next step is going to be to change the blend mode of our sun flare. So in order to do that, we'll make sure that our sun flare layer is indeed selected, and then we want to come to our layer blend modes. And as you cycle through them, you're going to see different effects. But for this specific thing, what we're looking for is a blend mode that's going to allow only the brightest pixels to show up, and it's going to hide everything that is darker. And so for me, this screen blend mode is what I'd like to settle on. Now we can always come in and Command or Control T to transform it again, move it over a little bit. Yeah, that looks about right. And that's going to add a really nice, beautiful sun flare to our photograph. But for me, I'd like it to be a little bit more extreme. So what I could do is with my layer 3 selected, which is our added sun flare, we can just hit Command or Control J, which will duplicate that layer, also duplicating the effect. And because the layer is already on a blend mode of screen, we don't have to change the blend mode again, which is really great. But my only concern now is that this sun flare is kind of starting to encroach on my subject a little bit more than I would like. So since that's the case, what I might consider doing is selecting my subject and then adding a mask to the added sun flare, not the original sun flare, but the added one. So for that, we'll go back, we will select our background layer, then we're going to come up to our select menu at the top, choose select and choose subject from the menu. That's going to give us marching ants around the subject of our image. And with that selection, what we can do is we can select our layer 3 copy, which is our sun flare copy, and add a mask to it. Now, here's the interesting part of this. If we look down at our mask preview, you can see that the added sun flare is only being applied now to the subject and not the background where I'd like it. So with this mask selected, I want to make sure that everybody selects that mask icon and hits Command or Control I to invert that mask. Now, if we look at our added sun flare, you can see that it's only being applied to the background and while saving the subject, so the visibility of the subject is still there. Now, if for any reason you want to add more, if you want to go even more extreme on that sun flare, you can do exactly what we did before. You can select both of these layers and then hit Command or Control J to duplicate them again. And so what that's now doing is we have 4 of our sun flares. 2 of them are affecting our subject, and 2 of them are only affecting the background. But as you can see, it gives quite an interesting vibe or look to our image. We're starting to feel like this image has texture. It has a life of its own. We're really starting to get something that looks extra neat. The last step on this image is going to be to add a little bit of selective color and color toning to it. Now, this is something we're going to do manually. All of the overlays that I have gifted you today in this class, all of those are part of my spring and summer pack, which I mentioned, which is going to be launching soon. And it has over 900 different elements, gradients, actions, custom brushes, sun flares like you've just seen. We have dusty light rays, which you can add in for very cool effects. We have atmosphere. There are rain overlays and rainbow overlays and over 300 peek throughs at varying visibilities or varying blur depths. So I always love the blurriest of them all when it comes to my peek through overlays. I think they add texture, but they don't take away from the subject. So that's why I love those. All of those are going to be included, but now we're going to go freestyle, okay? We're going to start with a selective color adjustment layer right up here. And let's start with our reds. Let's start at the top. Let's pull a little bit of cyan out of the reds. I'm going for like a rosy kind of feel to this image. It can be dark. That's not a problem. I'd love it to be dark. I'd love it to be contrasty, a little bit more contrasty. But right now, what I'm seeing when I look at the image just in its infancy, or the color of the image in that way, I'm seeing that there's quite a bit of green tonality applied to the entire image. And I'm not necessarily sure I'm a fan of that green tonality. So I'm going to try and fix that using selective color. I love selective color because it allows you to really fine tune every color that's added to a specific color in your image. So you've got your cyan and your red slider. So in your reds, you can either add cyan or subtract cyan, which means add red. Okay, so for this, we're going to go to maybe 42, negative 42. Now here, we've got our green and magenta, so we can either add magenta or subtract magenta, aka add green to our reds. So we don't want to do that. We'd like to just add a little bit of magenta to our reds, and then maybe adding a little bit of warmth, a little bit of yellow to our reds as well. Now we're going to move on from our reds to our yellows, in which case we're going to add a little bit of cyan, so 26. We'll subtract a little bit, tiny bit of the magentas from the yellows, or we will add green to the yellows. The next thing we want to do is take quite a bit of the yellow out of the yellows. Okay, now let's go over to greens. And you can already start to see that the background, because of all the yellow and the greens and the trees, you can start to see that the background is starting to neutralize, and we're losing that all over green tinge to our image, which is what I'm trying to go for here. So I am going to go quite extreme for our greens. I'm going to take out almost all of the cyan from our greens. I'm going to take out literally all of the magenta and all of the yellow from our greens. Now I want to move on. We're not going to modify the cyans, the blues, or the magentas because there aren't any in this image. But what I can do is move on to the whites, neutrals, and blacks. So we'll start with the whites. And now we're going to modify the highlights of our image. We're going to add or subtract cyan or red from the highlights of our image. So this is not concerned with color at this point. It's now by tonality of the pixel. Is the pixel brighter or is it darker or is it in the middle? That's how this is going to decide whether or not it changes the color of that pixel. So with our whites, we're going to actually subtract cyan, a significant amount of cyan from our whites. We're going to add magenta to our whites. See how I'm starting to get that rosiness? And we're going to add quite a bit of yellow to our highlights or our whites as well. Let's move on to our neutrals. Because most of this image is in the neutral space, I really want to make sure I don't go too far with the sliders on this specific area. So we'll add 13 of cyan, we'll add 6 of magenta, and we'll add 5 of our yellows. And then for our blacks, we're going to add just a touch of magenta to our blacks, and then take away some of the yellow out of our blacks. And there is our split toning. Oops, maybe a little bit more. So here's our before and our after. I brought that bluishness back in. I brought the reds back in. I really made the reds pop. And I just feel like overall, that is a nicer representation of the image. So if we go back and we look at our initial image, we look at our original, it's a beautiful image. I love how it was shot. It's really nice. But once we add in all of the embellishments that I've included for free in this tutorial, it really does make this image shine. All right, folks, this is the power that I want you guys to start realizing and start playing around with. There is such a thing as regular developing for your images, but there's no reason why you can't take that and take it to the next level and start really developing your images in a way that make them unique to everything else that you see out there. Your images are going to stand out from the crowd and really have that wow factor about them that a lot of other images don't. And that's why I want to just open your eyes a little bit and just dip a toe in the water of embellishing your photos like this using overlays and really creating amazing effects for your images. So if you've learned something, if you liked what I taught in today's class, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you hit subscribe so you know when my other videos are coming out. And of course, leave a comment so that I know what you guys want to learn next when it comes to Photoshop and Lightroom. And with that, I will see you on the next course.